Bienvenidas, bienvenidos. We are in Crans-Montana in the Valois Canton of Switzerland. And we are going to be talking about Crans-Montana and Switzerland today. But first, this is Latina Literati. If you enjoy amazing stories, wonderful people from past and present, and great books, then this is the channel for you. Crans-Montana is in the canton of Valais. And cantons are the municipalities or the equivalent of maybe counties or states in other countries. There are 26 cantons in Switzerland, and there have been cantons in the area of Switzerland since the 13th century. The current confederation, the Swiss Confederation made up of the cantons, was established in 1848. Some of the cantons before that were part of other empires, for example, the Habsburg Empire. And today we're going to talk about Switzerland and a little bit about Crans-Montana. There are what they call les trois visages, the three sides of Switzerland, the German side, the French side, and the Italian side. And most Swiss speak at least several of those languages, along with Romanish, which is a type of kind of mixture of German with other languages that the Swiss speak as well. The main centers of Switzerland are on the French side, Geneva, on the German side, Zurich, and on the Italian side, Lugano. And those are financial centers for famous Swiss banks, but we'll talk about that a bit later. Crans-Montana is a fabulous ski resort in the winter, and in the summer, it hosts events like the Omega Golf Open, or the Dirt Bike World Cup. Who knew such a thing existed? But there is a Dirt Bike World Cup, and it is hosted in places like Crans-Montana. You're in the Alps, you're very high, it's very beautiful, and so it's perfect for these types of outdoor activities. People like Roger Moore, the James Bond actor, have lived in Crans-Montana, as well as golfers like Sergio Garcia. So many famous people make Crans-Montana their home for at least part of the year. It's very beautiful. You're clean, spectacular views, alpine air. Crans-Montana is actually known for being a place where there have been spas and sanatoriums where people have gone to get better from everything from tuberculosis to other maladies. Before we knew the causes of these maladies, people thought that the fresh alpine air would help cure you, and it probably does, but not by itself necessarily. So there were all sorts of sanatoriums up here in the Alps that would treat you for all of the maladies that you might have. Perhaps the most famous Swiss person is, of course, Albert Einstein. And Albert Einstein is born in a part of Switzerland that was part of a German empire and became a canton of Switzerland in 1901. His first job was a clerk at the Swiss Patent Office in Bern. And in 1904, he would successfully present his dissertation to the University of Zurich. Albert Einstein retained his Swiss citizenship throughout his life. But most people, when they think of Switzerland, they think of chocolates. And as I've mentioned before, there's not a single cacao tree in Europe. The chocolate is brought in from Africa and from Latin America, mixed, refined, produced, and then resold as Swiss chocolates. And that is purportedly a definition of development, when you take other people's raw products and repackage them as your own. But Swiss chocolates are simply labeled here. They're mixed, labeled, and then sold as Swiss chocolates. Interesting that I think it's fourth or fifth export product of Switzerland are watches. The Swiss have convinced us that if we want a lifestyle, we need the watch. So they're willing to sell us that. And it was over $2 billion in watches sold last year from Switzerland. So that's a lot of watches, a lot of timekeeping. And of course, we think of the Swiss Army knives. Most of us receive them as gifts in high school. They're part of kind of that growing up phase, you need a Swiss Army knife that has all of the collection of things that you might need if you're out in the middle of nowhere, in the Alpine or other forests. But really, what produces 10% of the Swiss economy is Swiss banking. Switzerland holds 1 out of every 4 currency units that are considered cross-border deposits. And what that means is that currencies that aren't held in their home country, whatever country that may be in the world, Switzerland holds 1 of every 4 currencies units, 1 of every 4 currency units that are taken out of the country. So, for example, if you're in India or you're in, Canada or in Tanzania and you want a Swiss bank account, you establish that. And the account can hold funds, it can hold anything of value really, stamp collections or treasures, whether jewelry or artwork, anything of value can be held in these accounts. Half of all Swiss deposits are non-Swiss held. So in other words, people from other countries have deposited valuables in Swiss banks. And that's huge. It's in the trillions of dollars. In fact, we don't even know. Because since the 1700s, the Swiss law has made it a criminal offense to say absolutely anything about depositors. So that means that no one, not a government, not a company, not anyone knows what goes into those accounts. Also, there are specific rules and regulations that Swiss bankers have to follow in terms of the process of setting up these accounts. So for example, if you're a US passport holder or have ever held a US passport or a US resident, they will not open an account for you. Why? Because the US Treasury has said that the Swiss banks have to pay them. If you owe the US Treasury any funds, Swiss banks, under recent agreements, have to pay the US Treasury. And so they aren't willing to do that. They don't want to have anything to do with their depositors' funds. They just want to keep them and earn money on them. So they no longer allow US residents and or nationals, even if you give up your US nationality, that you can't open up a bank account in Switzerland, which I thought was fascinating as well. So really, since the 1700s, Switzerland has been a place where people have felt that they can deposit their funds, and the bankers are considered prudent and conservative, and the country is considered very stable since it's purportedly been neutral for many of the wars. And so Switzerland has been the place to deposit funds from all over the world, from all sorts of activities, legal and illicit, as well as all sorts of individuals. Doesn't matter what your background is, you can set up a Swiss bank account. Another interesting aspect of the Swiss banking system is that they have special numbered accounts so that no one knows, not even the banker knows, who the depositor is. And they're secret numbered accounts. You've seen them in different movies, James Bond, Wolf of Wall Street and all that, so that only the depositor knows what's being held by the Swiss bank and no one else. And valuable assets can be transferred from generation to generation and no one will ever know. It's completely secret. So I thought that was fascinating. The CIA held an investigation called Operation Safe Haven, and it's considered one of the largest robberies in the history of the world. It's unknown how much was kept, but during the World Wars, people who were worried about their assets placed them in Swiss banks. And when the people perished in the wars and their relatives came asking, the Swiss said, "We don't know anything about it. We'll never know the amount, but it's probably in trillions of dollars of current worth that was simply kept by the Swiss banks." There was a fund that was established to pay some of the claimants that went back to Switzerland and said, "My father, my uncle, my grandparents, whoever set up this account, here are the receipts, this is what was in there." And so very few people have been able to collect from the Swiss banks, unlike banks in Paris or London where the same thing happened and they provided the documentation and they were simply paid. And so it put a great deal of stress and a great deal of pressure on the Swiss government by organizations around the world who said, you can't do that. I mean, it flies in the face of the laugh test, as they call it, the immorality of keeping war victims' funds. But there you have it. History will let us know, I guess, at some point what happened to those funds, but they simply disappeared. And I should say that funds on both sides, so it didn't matter what side of the war you were on, Switzerland accepted trainloads of gold from the Axis powers, and it accepted deposits from anyone who wanted to deposit valuable assets, including artwork, jewelry, gold taken from teeth, really horrendous things. But they never asked where did the funds or the gold come from, they just accepted. So I thought that was a historical note that needed to also be shared. But let's get back to Switzerland in the modern times. So over 80 international organizations have their headquarters in Switzerland, everything from the Red Cross to the International Olympic Committee to the World Trade Organization. I mean, you could just go on and on and on. Dozens and dozens and dozens of international organizations consider Switzerland to be a stable country, purportedly neutral country, and a place where their employees can live a good life. So many organizations are based in Geneva and other places in Switzerland. So it's interesting that you have people from all over the world living in Switzerland. It's a really small, landlocked country, but has done an incredible job being the financial center of Europe. And now for my favorite part of the video, the book recommendations. So the first book I'm going to recommend is called The Gilded Chalet. It's a really humorous book. It's a very light read, and it really talks about Switzerland as spa central, hilarious anecdotes and chisme about what was going on with all sorts of famous people in these different spas. So really recommend it. It's a funny read. It's a great read. And as always, we recommend you first check your library, you first check with your local bookseller, and if those aren't available to you, we always include links so that you can acquire the books through independent booksellers in the description box. So please check with your local bookseller first. The second book that I'm going to recommend is called Einstein's Dreams by Alan Light. Fascinating book, because what it does is it takes the background of Switzerland and kind of plays with Einstein's theories. So really fun book, talks about different aspects of Einstein's life in Switzerland and also his theories, and kind of uses the Alps and different parts of Switzerland to bring out aspects of Einstein's ideas. So really fun book, recommended. And then the third book that I'm going to recommend is A Tramp Abroad by Mark Twain. Mark Twain, one of the greatest U.S. writers, hilarious adventures that he has all over Europe, including Switzerland. We all know Mark Twain. We all know his manner of writing, and he is hilarious. Lots of adventures, lots of stories to tell about different parts of Europe, and of course, including Switzerland. So highly recommend that book. Thank you so much for joining us on this joint journey. We would love you to subscribe to Latina Literati, and we'd love to hear what you're reading. What are you reading? What would you like us to talk to you about? Hope you've enjoyed this video. Let us know what you thought of this content and of the books recommended. Have you read any of them? Let us know. So as always, con mucho cariño, mucho salud y mucho amor. Gracias.